The beautiful alien girl's thick blue blood dripped from her forehead, spattered on the cold metal floor, pooling around Mark Foster's armored human boots. He pulled her close to his chest, shielding the terrified Pandronian named Weezon with his body, pumping plasma bolts into the helmets of the alien guards storming the research lab. Mark was the leader of the elite human special forces unit called the Ghost Wolves. He and his team had covertly entered this Pandronian military facility on planet Zephyr 6, under the cloak of night. Their mission was to steal advanced alien shield technology that could let humanity's ships withstand the Pandronians' devastating plasma torpedoes. Without those shields, the human fleet would be decimated in days, and Earth's orbital defenses would crumble. Billions would burn. Mark's best friend, Jake Thompson, laid demo charges on the vault doors guarding the shield tech. Alex Chen, their hacker, disabled alarms and security systems. But then they received intel that Dr. Zalax, a high-ranking alien scientist, was at the facility. Mark saw a chance to capture him for crucial information that could help humanity. Alarms suddenly blared as Pandronian's guards flooded in. Plasma bolts flew in the brutal firefight. Mark saw the alien girl cowering and rushed to protect her, not knowing why. Maybe he couldn't ignore his instinct to help the innocent. Weezon looked at him with huge, frightened purple eyes, saying something in her alien tongue. He pulled her to him as his rifle barked, not understanding why he risked the mission for her. But he would soon find that this fateful meeting would change both their lives and the entire course of the war. As their bootsteps pounded through the corridors, an alien voice crackled through the facility's intercoms, shouting what sounded like orders in a harsh, guttural language. Mark's translator picked up one word: Zalax. He glanced at the alien girl, Weezon, noting how her purple eyes widened in recognition. "That's my father they're talking about," she said, her voice quavering. "He's the lead scientist here. I was just visiting him when you attacked." Mark nodded, pieces falling into place. Dr. Zalax wasn't just a high-value target, he was a bargaining chip. Capture him, and the Ghost Wolves could force the Pandronians to the negotiating table. He keyed his comm. "Jake, Alex, change of plans. Focus on grabbing the shield tech. I'm going after Zalax. We'll regroup at the exfil point." Acknowledgements crackled in his ear as he turned to Weezon. "Stick close and keep your head down," he ordered. "I'll keep you safe." She bit her lip, but nodded, falling in behind him as they moved deeper into the facility. Pandronian security forces boiled out to meet them. The close quarters erupted into a brutal melee of stabbing, shooting, and hand-to-hand grappling. Mark fought like a man possessed. Weezon always shielded behind him. Alien blood splashed hot across his armor as he cut them down. During a momentary lull, Weezon spoke up, her voice soft. "I never wanted this war, you know. I don't think my people should be fighting yours." Mark glanced back at her, surprised. "That makes two of us." She smiled sadly. If only the rest of the galaxy felt that way. Mark had no response to that. But as they pushed on, he found himself seeing Weezon as more than just an alien, more than a mission objective. She was a person as caught up in this damn war as he was, and just maybe, she represented a fragile hope for peace. At last they reached the door to Dr. Zalax's private lab. Mark shouldered it open, rifle leveled, only to find the scientist frantically stabbing at a console, deleting data. "Father, stop!" Weezon cried out. Dr. Zalax spun, his eyes going wide as he saw his daughter at a human's side. You traitor!" he bellowed. "You've doomed our people." "It's over, Doctor," Mark said, gesturing with his rifle. "You're coming with us. We can end this war." "Never," Zalax snarled. Faster than Mark could react, he produced a plasma blade from his sleeve and lunged. Mark barely got his rifle up in time to block the humming, spitting blade. He lashed out with a kick, sending Zalax staggering back. The two warriors clashed in a deadly dance, parrying and riposting, the air crackling with burring plasma. Mark gave ground, fighting defensively, analyzing Zalax's style. The doctor was fast, but Mark was faster. At last he saw his opening. He ducked a slash, pivoted inside Zalax's guard, and cracked the hilt of his rifle across the alien's temple. Zalax dropped like a stone. "Father!" Wezen rushed to his side, cradling his head. Mark was already pulling out restraints when the world turned white. The wall of the lab vanished in a billowing eruption of flame. Shrapnel scythed through the air. Alarms screamed. Secondary explosions rocked the room as chemicals ignited. They had only seconds before the entire place went up. "Wezen, come on," Mark yelled. No response. A dark, awful realization clawed at him. She wouldn't leave her father. Another explosion, closer. No time. Mark charged forward, scooped up Wezen's limp body, and sprinted for the shattered window. Holding her tight, he leaped, just as a gout of flame roared out behind them. The impact with the ground drove the breath from Mark's lungs. He tucked into a roll, absorbing the momentum, making sure his armored body shielded Wezen. Shrapnel and debris rained down around them. Somehow, impossibly, they were both still alive. Mark staggered to his feet, pulling Wezen up with him. She clung to his arm, eyes glazed with shock. He scanned the tree line, searching for threats, as the lab complex behind them belched smoke and fire into the night sky. "Mark!" The shout drew his attention. It was Alex and Jake sprinting toward him through the undergrowth, a bulky case clutched between them, the shield tech. "You're alive." "Barely," Mark grunted. "Sit rep." "We got it," Jake said, patting the case. "But after that explosion, every Pandronian for clicks around will be swarming this place." "Then we better get moving," Mark said. "Back to the extraction point, double time." "What about her?" Alex gestured to Wezen, who still gripped Mark's arm like he was the only solid thing in the world. Mark met her gaze, seeing the fear and loss there, but also a flicker of something else. Trust, maybe, hope. His jaw tightened. "She's coming with us." As the ghost wolves melted into the shadows of the alien forest, Mark's mind raced. They had the shield tech, they had a way to save humanity, but the mission had gone nothing like he'd planned, and now, with an alien girl at his side, he faced questions he'd never imagined. But deep down he knew one thing for certain. He would keep Wezen safe no matter the cost. The connection between them, forged in blood and fire, was too powerful to ignore. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew they would face it together. The alien forest closed around them, dark and foreboding. Mark took point, rifle at the ready, his senses straining for any sign of pursuit. Behind him, Wezen, Jake, and Alex moved in a tight formation, their footfalls nearly silent on the dense undergrowth. Hours passed in tense, watchful progress. Then, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, they stumbled across a clearing. In its center squatted a squat, duracrete structure, half reclaimed by creeping vines. A Pandronian military outpost, long abandoned. "We'll rest here," Mark decided. "Jake, Alex, secure the perimeter. Wezen, with me, will sweep the interior." They approached cautiously, Mark's rifle never wavering from the darkened entrance. At the threshold he paused, straining his ears. There, the faint scuff of a boot on concrete. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Don't shoot!" The voice that called out was strong, female, and speaking flawless English. "We're not your enemy." From the shadows, a group of Pandronians emerged, weapons held carefully at their sides. At their head strode a tall, powerfully built male, his features sharp and proud beneath his swept-back crest of horns. Wezen gasped. "Zax, is that you?" The leader's eyes widened. "Wezen, by the gods, I thought you were dead." "I thought the same of you." Tears sprang to Wezen's eyes as she rushed forward, clasping forearms with the Pandronian in a warrior's greeting. "What are you doing here?" "Fighting back." Zax's expression hardened. "Against the Emperor, against this unjust war, we're rebels." Mark slowly lowered his rifle, mind racing. Rebel Pandronians, this changed everything. Zax turned to him, gaze appraising. "I am Zax, once of the Emperor's own guard. Now I lead those who would see our people free of his tyranny. I know you, human. You are the one they call the Ghost Wolf. Why have you come to this place?" Mark gestured to the case holding the stolen shield tech. "We need to get this to human space. It could end the war." Zax nodded slowly. "A noble goal, one I share. I propose an alliance. Help us and we will see you safely to your territory." Mark hesitated, weighing his options. Trust was a precious commodity in war, but Zax was no ordinary Pandronian, and if there was even a chance this alliance could bring peace. "We have an agreement." As the rebels led them into the outpost, Mark fell into step beside Wiesen. "I never knew there was a resistance among your people." "Nor did I," Wiesen admitted. "We have both learned much, it seems, about each other's worlds and about each other." There was a warmth in her gaze that sent an unfamiliar flutter through Mark's chest. In that moment, the gulf between their species seemed very small indeed. In the days that followed, an unlikely bond formed between the human soldiers and the Pandronian rebels. Jake and Alex worked tirelessly alongside Zax's engineers to modify the shield tech, preparing it to be a game-changer in the war. Mark and Wiesen often found themselves in quiet conversation, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the future. The easy camaraderie, the sense of shared purpose, was like nothing Mark had experienced before. For the first time, an end to the conflict seemed within reach. But it was not to last. The attack, when it came, was swift and brutal. Pandronian gunships screamed over the trees, disgorging squads of elite troopers. At their head marched a figure clad in ornate armor, barking orders in a cold, imperious voice. General Crom, ruthless enforcer of the Emperor's will. There was no time to think, only to react. Mark found himself back-to-back with Wiesen, firing into the oncoming horde. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the air, sizzling and sparking. Screams of pain and fury rose from human and Pandronian throats alike. They fought with desperate skill, rebels and ghost wolves side by side, but Crom's forces were simply too numerous. Mark saw Jake go down, his chest a smoking ruin. Alex fell moments later, a dozen scorch marks stitching her body. The shield tech lay forgotten, blasted to useless scrap. "Fall back!" Zax roared over the chaos. "We'll cover you. Get your people out, Wolf." Mark wanted to argue, but the rebel leader brooked no dissent. Anguish twisting his heart, he started to back toward the tree line, laying down suppressing fire. Most of the team followed. Most, but not all. Wiesen remained at his side, her rifle spitting death, her eyes alight with a fierce, defiant resolve. "What are you doing?" Mark shouted. "Then go with the others." "My place is here." Wiesen's voice was calm, certain. "With you." Mark started to protest, to order her to safety, but the words died on his lips as their eyes met. In that instant of connection, he understood. She would not leave him. Not now. Not ever. Gaz 1. They turned to face the oncoming storm, weapons blazing, hearts aligned. Crom's warriors swarmed toward them, a tide of chrome and plasma. Mark and Wiesen met them head-on, a human and a Pandronian, two halves of a whole, united against all odds. They fought as they had never fought before, a dance of desperate, deadly grace. Wiesen was a blur of motion, her blade flashing, her aim unerring. Mark was a bulwark of strength, unstoppable, unbreakable. Shoulder to shoulder, they held the line, buying precious seconds for their comrades to escape. But it couldn't last. A plasma bolt took Wiesen in the thigh, sending her to one knee. Another punched through Mark's armor, searing into his side. Slowly, inexorably, the enemy pressed in. As the ring of Pandronian troopers tightened, Mark locked eyes with General Crom across the battlefield. The merciless gaze of a true believer stared back, alight with cruel triumph. In that moment, Mark knew with cold certainty that this was the end. But if he was to die here, on this alien world, he would not do so alone. His hand found Wiesen's, their fingers interlacing. Palm to palm, they faced the enemy, weapons raised in one final act of defiance. "It's been an honor," Mark said softly, "to fight beside you." "The honor," Wiesen replied, her voice thick with emotion, "has been all mine." Plasma fire hammered their position, flash-boiling the air, turning sand to glass. Mark felt the impacts, felt his strength ebbing. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision, but he held on to Wiesen's hand, held on to the connection between them, bright and shining amidst the chaos of war. And as the world faded away, As the last embers of consciousness guttered and died, a strange peace settled over Mark Foster. He had found something here, on this battlefield on the edge of known space, something worth fighting for, something worth dying for. In the end, that was enough. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, flash-boiling the Duracrete walls of the command center. Mark and Wazen ducked behind a bank of sparking consoles, the acrid stench of melted circuitry filling their nostrils. "We can't hold them off much longer," Mark panted, slamming a fresh power cell into his rifle. "Ammo's almost gone." Wazen leaned out to snap off a shot, dropping a Pandronian trooper who had ventured too close. "Then we make our stand here." Mark's gaze darted around the room, searching for something, anything that could turn the tide. There, the outpost's reactor control system, its holographic display still glowing faintly amidst the carnage. "The self-destruct," he said grimly. "It's our only chance. We can take Crom and his goons with us." Wazen nodded, her jaw tight. "Do it!" Mark vaulted over the console, sprinting for the control panel. His fingers flew across the interface, initiating the destruct sequence. The display pulsed red, demanding final confirmation. He slapped his hand down on the biometric scanner. And then the world went white. A plasma bolt, fired with malicious precision, slammed into the console inches from Mark's face. He staggered back, momentarily blinded, the skin of his cheek blistering with the heat. Through watering eyes he saw the damage. The control system was a fused ruin, the destruct sequence frozen halfway through initiation. The only way to finish it now was to physically hold down the activation switch. He lunged for the switch, ready to sacrifice himself to end this, but another hand got there first. Wazen's slim blue fingers wrapped around the lever, her eyes meeting his. "Let me," she said softly. "You've got a better chance of making it out of here." "Wazen, no." "Please, Mark." Her voice caught. "Let me do this, for my people, for yours, for us." Mark's heart clenched. He wanted to argue, to insist on staying with her, but he knew she was right. One of them had to hold that switch. One of them had to get this intel back to humanity. He pulled her close, their faces inches apart. "I'll come back for you," he whispered. "I swear it." And then he kissed her, fierce and desperate, pouring all the things he couldn't say into that one searing touch. Her lips were soft, trembling against his. For a moment, the world fell away. No war, no death, just the two of them, hearts beating as one. But the moment couldn't last. With a ragged gasp, Mark tore himself away, sprinting for the doorway. Plasma fire chased him, splattering against his shields. He didn't look back. He couldn't. In the corridor beyond, a hulking figure loomed out of the smoke. General Crom, eyes blazing with hateful triumph, a plasma saber sizzling to life in his fist. "Leaving so soon, human," he snarled. "And here I thought you wanted to die with your alien whore." White-hot rage surged through Mark's veins. He activated his own saber, the amber blade humming to life. "Her name," he growled, "is Wazen." And then he was moving, a blur of vengeful fury. Crom met his charge and the corridor erupted into a storm of whirling plasma. They danced a lethal waltz, blades clashing, sparks cascading. Mark's muscles burned with the strain, but he pushed harder, faster. For Jake, for Alex, for Wazen. An opening, a fractional hesitation in Crom's defense. Mark seized it, battering the general's blade aside and slamming a boot into his chest. Crom staggered, off balance. Mark pounced, his saber arcing down. The world fractured. A roar like 1,000 thunderclaps slammed into Mark, hurling him down the corridor. He hit the ground hard, skidding and tumbling, the breath blasted from his lungs. Realization pierced the haze of pain and confusion. The self-destruct. Wazen, she'd done it. Crom lay unmoving a few meters away, stunned by the blast. With the last of his strength, Mark crawled to the fallen general, fumbling at his belt. There, a personal teleporter, standard issue for Pandronian officers. Mark's fingers closed around the device. Darkness swarmed in at the edges of his vision as he input coordinates, any coordinates, just away from here. The teleporter hummed to life, reality twisting, a kaleidoscope of light and color. And then blackness took him, and he knew no more. He awoke to the sterile white confines of a human medbay, his body a patchwork of bandages and regenerative gel. A face swam into view above him, craggy, careworn, but achingly familiar. Colonel Raven, his old CO. "Easy, son," Raven said gruffly. "You're safe now, your team." "Didn't make it," Mark rasped. "It wasn't a question." Raven's eyes told him all he needed to know. "I'm sorry, Mark, but you did it. The eggheads are already tearing into that Pandronian tech you brought back. Said it'll change everything." Mark barely heard him. His mind was light years away in a shattered outpost on a distant world, with a blue-skinned alien girl who'd stolen his heart and saved his life. "Wazen," he whispered. Is there any chance?" Raven looked away. "I'm sorry, son, that blast, nothing could have survived that." Grief hit like a physical blow, driving the air from Mark's lungs. He squeezed his eyes shut, hot tears leaking from beneath the lids. He saw her in his mind's eye, as vivid as if she were standing before him. The mischievous quirk of her lips, the way her eyes danced when she laughed, the fierce, unflinching bravery that had saved them all. And the kiss, that one perfect, shining moment when all the barriers between them had fallen away, and they'd just been together. He clung to that memory like a lifeline, even as despair threatened to pull him under. She was gone. But what they'd had, brief and beautiful and bright, that would live forever. Far above, in the cold void of space, a battered pod tumbled end over end. Within, curled in a tangle of seared wiring and flickering displays, lay a wounded Pandronian girl. Weazen's eyes fluttered open, her breath coming in shallow, pained gasps. Every nerve screamed in agony, her body a ruin of scorched flesh and shattered bone. But even through the pain, through the gnawing fear, one image blazed in her mind. One moment of perfect clarity in the chaos. Mark's face inches from her own, his eyes bright with unshed tears, and his lips warm and firm and desperate against hers. In that moment she'd seen the future, the promise of a galaxy where human and Pandronian stood together, hand in hand, as allies, as friends, as something more. It was a promise she intended to keep, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. "I'm coming, Mark," she whispered into the darkness. "Just hold on, I'm coming." With a groan of tortured metal, the escape pod fired its thrusters, seeking a new course through the stars, toward home, toward hope. Toward him. Months crawled by, each day a waking nightmare for Mark Foster. He went through the motions, training, briefings, missions, but his heart was a leaden weight in his chest, his soul torn asunder by Wazen's loss. Her sacrifice played over and over in his mind's eye, a taunting loop of what might have been. Then came the briefing that changed everything. Colonel Raven himself delivered the news, his weathered face grim. "The Pandronian Emperor," he said, "is holed up in his palace on Zephyr Prime. Intel suggests he's the linchpin holding their war effort together. Eliminate him, and we can end this, once and for all." Mark's fists clenched at his sides. "I'll do it." "Mark," Raven's eyes softened, "I know you're hurting, but—" "With respect, sir," Mark cut in, "there's no one more qualified, and no one with more reason to see this through." A beat of silence. Raven nodded. "Godspeed, son." The infiltration was a blur of motion and shadow, muscle memory guiding Mark through the Emperor's defenses, past patrolling guards, through winding corridors, to the very heart of Pandronian power. At last he burst into the throne room, rifle leveled, and froze. For there, standing at the Emperor's right hand, was a ghost, a phantom given flesh. Vaser. But not his Weazen. Her eyes, once so warm, were cold and hard. Her stance, once soft and graceful, now coiled with lethal tension. "What have you done to her?" Mark snarled, gaze fixed on the Emperor. A cruel smile split the monarch's face. "I remade her," Dr. Zalak said, "perfected her, the first of a new breed of soldier, loyal only to me. Horror and fury warred in Mark's heart. This was Wesen's father, the man he'd once fought so desperately to capture. Now he longed only to end him. "You're a monster," he spat. "No," Zalax sneered. "I am the future, and you, Ghost Wolf, you are already dead." He snapped his fingers. "Wesen, kill the human." And she moved, a blur of speed and violence, as unstoppable as an avalanche. Mark met her charge, instinct and training taking over, and the throne room descended into chaos. They danced a deadly waltz, Mark and Wesen, blades flashing, bodies twisting. Plasma scorched the air, sparks fountained. Every blow was agony, not of the flesh, but of the soul. To raise a hand against her, even in self-defense, tore at him like shrapnel. "Wesen, please," he begged, catching her blade on his own. "It's me, it's Mark." For a heartbeat she hesitated, a glimmer of something in those lavender eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by killer focus, and the onslaught redoubled. Zalax's laughter echoed through the chamber. "You waste your breath, human. She is mine now, mind and body, the prototype for a legion of perfect Pandronian warriors." Mark's blood turned to ice. The stolen shield tech. This was what Zalax had planned for it all along. An army of brainwashed super-soldiers, soulless and unstoppable. With a roar of desperate fury, Mark disengaged from Wesen and lunged for the Emperor. His blade hummed through the air, poised to pierce the tyrant's black heart. And then Wesen was there, faster than thought, faster than reason. Plasma met flesh in a hiss of vaporizing blood. Wesen staggered back, eyes wide, hand clutched to the smoke-wreath's hole in her chest. "No!" The scream tore itself from Mark's throat. He caught her as she fell, cradling her broken body, the battle forgotten. "Wesen, stay with me. Please." Her eyes fluttered open, no longer cold, no longer hard. In that moment she was his Wesen again, the girl he'd loved since the first. "Mark," she whispered, blood bubbling on her lips. I remember." Tears blinded him. "I'm here, I've got you." Her hand found his, weak but warm. "I'm sorry for everything." "Don't!" He shook his head fiercely. "You have nothing to be sorry for." A tiny smile, achingly sad. "I love you, I always—" A shudder racked her, and her eyes slipped closed. "Wesen! Wesen!" He clutched her tight as if he could anchor her to life by sheer force of will, but it was too late. She was gone. And the world ended. Some distant, rational part of Mark knew that Zalax escaped in the chaos, knew that the war still raged, that billions of lives still hung in the balance. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered lay cooling in his arms, never to wake again. They said the Pandronian Empire fell swiftly after that. Cut off the head and the body dies. From the ashes a new order arose, human and Pandronian alike, striving to build a lasting peace. Mark played his part. He wore the uniform, accepted the accolades, did what was expected of a hero. But his heart was buried with Wesen on a lonely hilltop on Zephyr Prime, beneath a tombstone that read simply, "She fought for what she believed in." And sometimes in the dark hours of the night, he'd swear he could still feel her hand in his, and hear her voice on the wind. "I love you," she'd say. "I'll wait for you." And he would smile through his tears and whisper back, "I'll find you in the next life." It was enough. It had to be. For in the end, they'd had each other, however briefly. A human boy and a Pandronian girl, star-crossed lovers in a galaxy at war. Their story was a tragedy, yes, but it was also a promise, a fragile spark of hope buried beneath the ash and blood and sorrow. And in a universe often short on hope, that made all the difference. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.